And we are on to the final class, which is Warrior, starting with Bladestorm. 3-cost spell, deal 1 damage to all minions, repeat until one dies. This is a pretty interesting card. Obviously, this is not a good card against like a token deck because, well, it just kills one thing. This is very powerful against any individual large minion. You're just like, okay, Bladestorm, kill it. Basically basically just a like deadly shot, assuming you don't have your own minion. Can also be very powerful with any kind of damage trigger, as long as like you have enough health to ensure that you're actually doing stuff profitably. I actually don't 100% know how this works with like Bomb Wrangler. I imagine it probably hits a Bomb Wrangler and then spawns a bot, spawns a bomb, and then if it hits the bomb, it will kill the bomb and then stop. But overall, if there was like Acolyte of Pain, which is now rotating, ends up not being around to go like nuts with Bladestorms. This feels like a very interesting card. Just as far as like figuring out, okay, well, what is the likely outcome of this on any given board? But yeah, not going to be good against a bunch of small minions. Can be very powerful against multiple big minions. Say your opponent has like 2 8/8s, you Bladestorm. The most likely outcome is one of them dies and the other is almost dead already. So yeah, I think that this is a card that's very likely to see a lot of play. Very powerful. Lots of board states where it can be like totally nuts on. And bare minimum, it's like, in a control deck, it's just going to kill your opponent's single big thing. Actually, oh, wait, no, this doesn't work exactly. Hold on. I actually totally I was thinking it was Bouncing Blade. It's not Bouncing Blade. All right, I'm just going to start this over entirely. Next up, we have Warrior, the final class, starting with Bladestorm. 3 mana, deal 1 damage to all minions, repeat until one dies. So this, at first glance, I thought this was basically Bouncing Blade, which is deal damage to a minion, and then keep doing it until one dies. This is all minions. So you absolutely know what this is going to do when you look at the board. Unlike a Bouncing Blade, which has a bunch of possible outcomes. Bladestorm, if there's a board full of 1/1s, it kills all the 1/1s. Full of 2/2s, it kills all the 2/2s. If it has 2 8/8s, it kills both 8/8s. Basically, it kills everything up to the smallest thing. And there's a lot of synergy cards that can be very powerful with this. Like, imagine there's a board, right, where you have a Frothing Berserker, and there are like a bunch of 2/2s. You just cast Bladestorm. Every 2/2 dies, your Frothing Berserker gets +2/+2 for each of them and itself, and just kills your opponent. So this is, I think, very, very powerful. It can always kill small things on the board and leave big things. If there's only big things, it kills the big things. So there's just a ton of ways to take advantage of this, both as just a raw removal spell. If your opponent just has one thing, it will always kill it. And then also any sort of damage triggers like Armor Smith. If your opponent has a board full of, if you have a board full of a bunch of small things, you can play a Bladestorm. Kills a bunch of them, giving you a ton of armor with Armor Smith. Say you have 4 Armor Smiths somehow. It's just like, okay, boom, 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 blow it all up. But yeah, so this, I think, is a very interesting card, very powerful card, and I expect it to see a lot of play. Next up, we have Wormall Challenger, which has one of the coolest game texts of anything. 3-cost, 1/10. Battlecry, choose an enemy minion, battle it to the death! So, obviously, this feels like a card that's especially good if you manage to hand buff it, right? If you manage to like get this thing bigger in your hand so it can actually fight something, larger than itself. As it stands, it's basically, okay, say your opponent has a 2 health minion. Say your opponent has a 2/2. This attacks it again. And you end up with a 1/6 and your opponent's guy's dead. If your opponent has a 3/3, attacks it, you have a 1/1, your 3/3's dead. But if you can buff this in any way, or if you use this with, say, a Frothing Berserker, like imagine that your opponent has a Mogashan Warden, and you have a Frothing Berserker. You Wormall Challenger the Mogashan Warden, and then your opponent's dead. But yeah, this can kill a Doomsayer. This can battle like a lot of things, basically up to a 4/4, right? This will kill. No, it won't. It won't kill a 4/4. It'll kill a 3/3. It will not kill a 4/4 because it dies on the third attack. It'll kill a 4/3, but it won't kill a 4/4. So, and then again, obviously, if you can buff this with anything, say you Galakroned it up, hit this with Galakron, and suddenly it's killing big things and leaving a big body behind. So I think this card's super cool. And yeah, I don't know how much play it'll see. It does seem like it's, you know, if there's Frothing Berserkers roaming around, this card is great in a deck with those. Those haven't really necessarily been good enough since Rush has been in so many different decks, and they don't really have the chance to survive against pretty much anyone. But yeah, pretty cool card. Next up, we have Imprisoned Gangplank, a 1-cost 2/2, dormant for 2 turns. When it awakens, equips a 3/2 axe. This is the Fiery War Axe of our dreams. It doesn't come down quite as fast as Fire War Axe. If you play this turn 1, on turn 3, you get a 1/1 and a 3. Let me start that over. If you play this on turn 1, on turn 3, you'll start the turn with a 2/2 and a Fiery War Axe, which is pretty powerful. It's slower, of course, than Fire War Axe, but than Fire War Axe was when it cost 2. But you can play this on turn 1, and then you'll have the War Axe on turn 3, and you'll also have your 3 mana to spend. So in any kind of like tempo-based matchup, I feel like this is actually a very, very good card. As long as you don't need the War Axe swing immediately, as long as you can possibly wait and have it delayed, you know, it's pretty powerful. Much like most of the dormant cards, this is a pretty weak card to draw if you need action immediately. But if you don't, this is, you know, if you draw this late, it's at worst still just a Fire War Axe that you get a couple turns later for just 1 mana. Also, the body that it gives you, it can be relevant with even in a control deck with stuff like you know, Armor Smith, even like Brawl. You know, this comes in, you're like, all right, I guess it's time to brawl. I got my my guy who helps me possibly win the brawl, and then I have my weapon that can kill a small thing that wins the brawl. Yeah, so I think this is actually like a pretty solid card. I do think that, of course, the like all the other dormant cards, if it does, you know, get drawn at the wrong time, it can be, you know, really unfortunate. But that's true of all of them, and frankly, that's true of a lot of cards. But generally, I think the dormant mechanic, of course, is at its best if you draw them early. When you play them on curve, they're very powerful because they give you something, you know, sort of ahead of curve, or in this case, not necessarily ahead of curve, but it gives you something that allows you to still spend your mana on curve there and have the weapon at your ready. So I think this is a card that will at least see some play, but probably not be showing up in most warrior decks. Next up, we have Kargath Prime, a 4-cost 4/4 rush, which by itself is already pretty good. With Death Rattle, summon or shuffle Kargath Prime into your deck. Kargath Bladefist, 4/4 rush for 4. Kargath Prime, 10/10 rush for 8. When it attacks and kills a minion, gain 10 armor. This, I think, is actually probably the most exciting of the Prime minions to me. Because I think that the front side of this is great. The fact that it has Rush means that you can trade it in so your opponent doesn't necessarily have a chance to silence it, which is always a risk for some of the other Primes. And the Prime version, an 8-cost 10/10, when an attack and kills a minion, gain 10 armor, is just so powerful in like almost any matchup, right? Like if you're playing against a control deck, a 10/10 Rush, you know, is often gonna like come down, kill something meaningful, and then gain 10 armor. So like you're gonna win, you know, a like long game fatigue plan or whatever. I just feel like this card is just really, really, really good. So yeah, this is I feel like a card that will go into lots of warrior decks. In fact, I think you almost need an excuse not to play this card, because it just feels like the front half is just a powerful removal effect, and the back half is just so good that I expect this to show up in most warrior decks outside of like ultra aggressive ones. Next up, we have Corsair Cache. 2-cost, draw a weapon, give it +1/+1. We have figured out how to get Ankar back. I mean, we've already seen decks using Ankar as like their only weapon, and then playing stuff to like bring Ankar back. Corsair Cache, Ankar is just such a powerful card in the pirate decks that the ability to get Ankar back and get Ankar in the first place, then get Ankar back. I expect that to be the primary use of Corsair Cache, is make my pirate warrior deck work off of Ankar. It can also be used with something like Arcanite Reaper, just to get more damage, right? You just upgrade preemptively. I think that most decks that want Arcanite Reaper care more about the efficiency of being able to spend their mana in the early turns to actually pressure people than having the automatic upgrade attached to it. But I could definitely see that in certain decks. You can also see like decks that care, weapons that care about like specific breakpoints. Like imagine if this was in Demon Hunter, being able to play this with the attacks, the cleave weapon. I don't remember the name of it, but like the fact that this can also just like find a specific weapon. If you play either just like something like Ankar, or you're playing like maybe there's a combo deck built around like Bulwark of Azzinoth somehow. This is just an example. Anything that draws a specific card type, something that you want to look at very specifically, very closely. And the fact that already in Warrior we know Ankar is a card that can like really carry a deck. It is important that like a lot of these Pirate Warrior decks care a lot about their early game tempo. So spending the 2 mana on 2 to draw your Ankar can often be detrimental. But a lot of those decks, because of the power of Ankar and stuff like Dread Corsair and the Parachute Brigand, can end up winning back a lot of the tempo, even if they don't necessarily have the early turns in the game on lockdown in quite the same way. So I think this is a potentially pretty powerful card that has a number of homes that I can already think of, and I expect there will be more. Next up is Blood Boil Brute, a 7-cost 6/8 rush, costs 1 less for each damaged minion. This is a pretty powerful card. If you're playing like a self-damage deck, like Risky Skipper, let's look at right now, right? Risky Skipper is one of the cards in like the Galakrond Warrior decks that's really strong. I do think that Risky Skipper is a card that's going to go down dramatically in value, and frankly, the Galakrond Warrior decks will go down a bit in value, given the rotation of Acolyte of Pain. So the inability to just like get a bunch of cards off of them, I think is a pretty big hit to those decks. However, Risky Skipper, enabling Battle Rage and then enabling Blood Boil Brute, because this is each damage minion, not just each of your damage minions. So you can easily imagine a board that has like 5 minions on it, where you play like Risky Skipper minion, you kill a couple minions, you play like Brute, those kill more minions, and now you just like have these giant brutes in play, and your opponent doesn't have anything. So yeah, I think this is like a pretty strong card. It's not like a what's its name, the mutate guy, Flesh Shaper, I forget his name. That you like was a 3/4, right? That was reduced cost per minion. This is damage minion only. It does have rush, but you can't evolve it. But it's big to begin with, so you didn't need to evolve it. It's huge. So I don't know. I think this is a card that, if there are a lot of like mid-range minion type fights, is a very good one. But it's not the sort of thing that you like necessarily proactively are looking to get out there, because it's not like an independent game-winning type card like the sort of mutate combo with Mogu Flesh Shaper is. Speaking of damaged minions, we have Bone Chewer Raider. Battlecry: if there is a damaged minion, get +1/+1 in rush. And interestingly, this is likely to get itself damaged when it attacks into another minion, to make sure you have more damaged minions. So that damaged minion may be dead, or the minion they have may be damaged. Another damaged minion. So yeah, I feel like more sort of like self-damaging theme, or want to damage things theme in Warrior. This is just a powerful card. 4/4 rush for 3, effectively. You're going to almost always be able to get this online in any matchup where you really care to get it online. And this just seems like a pretty solid card overall. Is Overlord's Whip still around? My favorite card. I think it is, right? No, it's from Rumble. Sadly, there's no more Overlord's Whip to really enable these damage decks. I think that, you know, with all the stuff like the Bloodboiled Brute and the Bone Chewer Raider, Overlord's Whip Warrior may just be too powerful, so they have to rotate it prior to having to just Hall of Fame it, of course, for being too good like Gen and Baku and totally dominating the metagame. But but yeah, I feel like obviously there's just so many tools in Warrior to damage minions, whether you're your own or your opponent's. That enabling something like Bone Chewer Raider is pretty easy and gives you a lot of good tools for helping win early to mid game combats. Next up is Sword and Board. 1 cost, deal 2 to a minion, gain 2 armor. This is a kind of an interesting card. It's like I've seen people compare it to Bash, and Bash was 3 cost, deal 3 damage, gain 3 armor. But that could go face, which is a very big difference to this card. This can't go face. This is only to a minion. Obviously, this is a very good card against like aggressive decks, being able to kill like a Flame Imp on turn 1 and you know, keep it from ever getting it to hit you and gain armor yourself. I think it's, you know, that would be that's obviously fantastic. But I don't see this as a card that necessarily just like gets played all the time in Warrior. I think this is a card that goes played in like Warrior in a metagame where there's a lot of small minion decks, or like Highlander Warrior or something to ensure that you're able to deal with early plays and get to your big powerful stuff. But I don't think this is a staple card like Bash was. I think this will be a fairly narrowly played card. Next up is Scrap Golem. 5 cost, 4/5. Taunt with Death Rattle, gain armor equal to this minion's attack. This is very similar to a Rotting Apple Bomb, except armor is better than healing yourself because healing yourself is always good. It's a mech, which doesn't really matter too much with all the magnetic stuff rotating out from standard. However, there are ways to buff the minion's attack, which will make it give you more armor than you would get like life from a Rotting Apple Bomb. Say you play this in a deck with Into the Fray. Into the Fray I'm a big fan of. I've played a lot of Into the Fray. Warrior, I got Legend with Into the Fray Warrior 1 season. But yeah, buff this with, Into the Fray, buff this with Armageddillo. A lot of ways that you can make this into a giant minion that gives you a whole bunch of armor off of its Death Rattle. So I think this is a solid card. And armor also obviously has synergy with Shield Slam, stuff like that. So I do think this is a solid card, and I think that it is not going to see like tons of play, but I can definitely see this finding a home in a variety of decks. Lastly, for Warrior, we have Bulwark of Azzinoth, a 3-cost weapon. It's a spiky shield. 1/4 weapon. Whenever your hero would take damage, this loses 1 durability instead. This is a very weird card. I think this is a very like circumstantial, situational metagame card. Like maybe there's like decks that have big burst damage combos that you would play Bulwark of Azzinoth to try and stop. But for the most part, I don't really expect this to see very much play. Because if you want to stop big burst damage combos as Warrior, you're probably just going to want to gain armor. You probably want to focus on, things that are better in general. It's not like you can like sideboard this in like you could in, like Specialist or whatever. If Specialist were a thing, maybe this is a card that you'd have in your one of your side decks for Specialist. But I just feel like this is probably not a card that is powerful enough and impactful enough in enough circumstances to really warrant inclusion in your deck. All right, that's it. That is all of the class cards.